Hey everybody. So welcome to PBR Monday recorded edition. The way we're going to do it from now on until I can straighten out whatever my internet connectivity problems are. I'm just going to record these things. It's not worth it to have you all anticipate it's going to be a live event. I'll just record it and then I will listen to it along with everybody else so we can all exchange comments in the comment section together. Before I get started tonight, a couple of things, a couple of announcements I want to make. I want to once again thank Charles Rhodes for doing everybody in the world a favor on Saturday by riding D1. I cannot possibly emphasize enough how important it is for you to do that if you live close. Pre-ride day one. Uh, won't cost you a thing except the gasoline to get up here and do it. And it's going to give you a really good idea of whether or not you've spent your whole summer planning on something. You're going to take a lot of time off. You're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to make all of these reservations along the way. Ride day one, figure out whether or not it's all going to be for naught. If you can make it through day one and you're not having any trouble, this thing is for you. But if you struggle a lot on day one and you do it early enough, well, then, you don't spend your whole summer planning for something that just might not work for you. Or you might need to wait another year. You might need to do a little bit more training. Do the navigation, ride it with a loaded bike, do all that stuff. So, Charles Rhodes, I'm going to have something pretty nice waiting for you at the flagpole because you really did everybody a favor. I'm sorry people kind of got on your case a little bit on the on your comments. I don't think anybody really meant it that way, but sometimes an imperfection of commenting without being able to see the body language and the facial expressions that go with it come off as overly harsh. But I think I and everybody else really respects what you did. So thank you again. The other thing I want to do before I get going is I want to point out the new backdrop behind me. As you know, we have an artist in residence, Dave Walks, and I talked to Dave a few weeks ago and said I could sure use a background for PBR Monday, and this is what he came up with. That's a Walks original. Dave, I don't know what to say. I'm going to send you some coin for this. He offered it up for nothing, but that's no good. I'm going to compensate you for this, and I really appreciate it. It's beautiful. When we got it out today and looked at it, everybody in the house was blown away by how cool it was. So thanks again, Dave, for participating to PBR Monday. And everybody else, Dave Walks is your guy. There's another piece back here by another person that's associated with the tour. The painting back there, or excuse me, the photograph over here is from Kevin Hogan. Both artists, talk to those guys. Again, Dave will paint you. He'll take your favorite tour photo and he'll make a wonderful painting out of it. The guy does original artwork. He's highly regarded. His stuff's in galleries all over the country, and he is a member of our community. So thank you again, David, and the backdrop is wonderful. So let's see if I can go through this and get through it pretty quickly. As I was saying earlier, when I started out teaching physics 30 years ago, and I taught my first college class, my syllabus was about a short paragraph long. And it basically said, if you think it's wrong, don't do it. At the end of my teaching career, 25 years later, my syllabus read like the Magna Carta. It was probably 10 or 15 pages long. And the reason for that is experience. I mean, after a while, you learn how the situations that you had never thought about are going to come up. And you have to, in order to be fair, plan for all of that. So the challenge point rules kind of sprung from something like that. Earlier on, when we first did the tour of Idaho, the whole concept was just to sort of ride from south to north. I never thought it was going to catch on, and neither did the other guys that helped me do it the first few times. After we were amazed that after we wrote it up, people started emailing us and asking all kinds of questions about it, and guys were showing up to do it, and that was kind of cool. But one of the things that we learned right away was that a lot of people were showing up on big bikes or bikes that are inappropriate, like KLR 650s. There's always been technical stuff on the tour. There wasn't as much then as there is now, but it was also on much fewer days. So we would read these, we'd tell guys, you're not going to be able to do this whole thing on that bike. Oh, yeah, we'll be fine. Then we'd look at their trip report later, and they'd skipped all the technical stuff, and the honest ones would admit it. They'd say, well, we did 90% of it, so, we're calling it good. Well, 90% is not good. You skipped the stuff that you would not have been able to do on that bike. So basically, to thwart that, I came up with this idea of challenge points. And we're going to put these challenge points in pretty technical places, hence a challenge point. And you'll have to acquire all of these challenge points to be able to finish the route and claim that you did it. So the first thing that happened after we did that was there was a team that came through that decided, you got to admire guys that can read the rule book. But what they decided to do was not actually ride the route, but just to ride in by the quickest route they could and poach each challenge point. So then we said, okay, well, we're going to start challenge sections to keep people on the trail, and a challenge point is typically in the middle of a challenge section. And it grew and grew, and it got more complex. And finally, about 10 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm tired of people working me every year and just, claiming they did all this stuff that I know they didn't do. So I'm done with it. And at that point, when I was getting ready to walk away from it, I found that what we had done had enough value to a lot of people that they wanted it to move along, and they kind of liked what we'd done. They said, look, the challenge points are kind of cool. It gives sort of a scavenger hunt kind of an aspect to it. So then we started putting like people and individuals on that you had to meet. And then it really exploded. People dug the heck out of that. They said, this is awesome. It makes it sort of a more fulfilling, holistic kind of an experience. It's more than just a motorcycle ride when you do this. So that's how this stuff started, and that's how it grew. And then a few years later, we started doing the 1, 2, and 3 team variations of the tour. We started giving you an opportunity to make up for challenge points that you'd missed. And the rules have changed a little bit every year, just as the route has changed a little bit every year. So that's the rationale. That's kind of how it got to be where it is. Let's spend some time just talking about the 2020 route and the 2020 rules. Now, they're different than the 2019 route and the 2019 rules. The rules and the route change a little bit every year. What we try to do is maintain the overall level of difficulty from year to year, but even that's not possible to do. There have been years, for instance, when there have been big fires that shut down big portions of the tour. And people got to ride around some stuff that might have weeded some of them out. I don't know. But overall, most years, I think the tour has been fairly comparable. So we're in 2020. Let's talk about the 2020 rules. First thing I want to bring up is there was actually a good question from a team that came up about 24 hours ago, and I want to address that. A team asked if, under current challenge point rules, if they knew someone that lived along the route somewhere north of Pocatello, if they could stay with that person. And I didn't know exactly how to answer that question. So I took it to the Touricals. That's the advisory group for this, all tour vets. And I like asking them questions like this because they always bring up angles that I hadn't thought about. And I don't want to go through the deliberations very much, and I don't want to give too many details because I don't want to identify the team. Thank you for asking the question, by the way. That's extremely honest, and what everybody in the Touricals said is that speaks highly of these people, that they wanted to ask the question rather than just go ahead and do it and beg for forgiveness later. Good on you for doing that. But the answer is no. And the Touricals had some excellent reasons behind it, reasons that I hadn't thought of. So you stay in hotels along the way, or you're sleeping on the ground at night if you don't make your nut. That's basically the way it works. The general thinking was, and I think I could reveal this without giving away too much, that if you know someone along the way, that's an advantage already all by itself. You know that on this one night you have access to their tools, their shop, the food that you like to eat, and other people don't have that. So yeah, in a way, it kind of gives you a little bit of a technical advantage. And also, it'd be a really difficult thing for us to police. This team might do an upstanding job of not taking advantage of the situation, but we have to make the same offer available to everybody. And there are other teams that perhaps would not. We see that every year. So the answer, unfortunately, is no. You stay in hotels every night along the way, or again, you're sleeping on the ground. But again, thank you for asking the question, and it speaks highly of you for asking instead of just doing it and then being mad later when we said that's a penalty. So let's talk about this 2020 route real quick here. What I want to do is go through the challenge points, a little bit more about the challenge sections, the challenge point rules, and then that ought to wrap it up. And hopefully we can get through this in under an hour. So day one, 8 challenge points in day 1. Not everybody needs all of those. Soloists only need 6 out of those 8. 2-person teams need 7. 3-person teams need all 8. Now, the idea behind all of these challenge points is the same. You don't have to be standing on exactly the spot. It's not exactly a geocache where there's something buried under a pile of leaves there. You just got to be kind of in the general vicinity, and all of these are in places where there's something cool to see. So just find some place that's close, park your bike, get off and take a picture. In terms of the picture, same thing. We asked for a selfie, so you're required to take a selfie at that spot. Take your helmet off, take a drink of water, eat a Kate's bar, relax for a minute, take the selfie. But you're also completely welcome to take scenic photos if you want. Upload them all. You have to take the selfie, but you can upload anything else that you want there as well. So let's just go through the day 1 list. The Utah-Idaho border, there's an iconic sign there, and you'll know it when you see it. You take the picture there. The Weston Peak Rock Slide is the second one, and there's a photograph of it right on the challenge point page. I'm looking at it right now. Oxford Peak, the third one. Now, that involves a short hike, and do not let me see your motorcycle in the background of one of those photos. That's a foot trail up there. The agencies monitor what we do, and if they get the idea that I'm allowing you to ride your motorcycles up there, it'll be trouble for all of us, so please don't do that. Walk. It says specifically this involves a short hike, so you should know that's coming. Kent's Canyon. That's a waypoint that's required for 2- and 3-person teams, and it's right on the crest at the top of Kent's Canyon. It's a gnarly climb to get up there, too. You'll be glad to stop when you get there for a second. Let your bike cool down. Elkhorn Crest is the same way. That's one for just 3-person teams, though, but it's another pass on the Elkhorn Crest. Robbers Roost, beautiful spot up there. You'll be glad to see the top of that when you get up there, and hopefully there's enough daylight left for you to snap a good photo. A lot of those selfies last year were shot. Income Pass, it's another place on the Portneuf Crest. You'll like it up there. And finally, the flagpole. A little bit about the flagpole, by the way. I'm sure all of you know the flagpole's on my property. It's private property. There are impressive-looking posted signs all over the place. There is a German Shepherd that looks like he's going to rip your leg off. The llama's spit and kick, too. So we try to discourage people from coming on our property. We put out all of the vibe in the world we can that we're dangerous hillbillies. During Tour of Idaho season, however, those of you who are doing a T1 are welcome to stop by the flagpole. And if you see me sitting out in my trailer, you're welcome to roll up the driveway. We'll sit down, have a beer, and talk. That's what it's all about. Now, T2 and T3 teams, not so much you guys. I don't know when you're coming, and I understand the desire to take a picture, and I guess I don't mind that much, but I don't want people beating on my door. Every year, I get woken up at 10 o'clock at night. My wife works nights. I have to put my kids to bed. Somebody's beating on that door at 10 o'clock. Hey, I just wanted to shake your hand, and that's no bueno. I don't like that too much. If it's a T1 team, I probably know you're coming. We've probably talked about whether or not I can meet you. But if it's T2 or T3, I don't have anything against those guys. That's why we made these routes. Go enjoy them, ride them. But I have my hands full with T1. So if you're a T2 or T3 team, wave as you go by, and that's it. By the way, there is a security camera right on that flagpole. So if I can't see you, I'll know that you came by. So not only do you take the picture, but I'll be able to see in my camera, so you can wave at it if you want to. All right, day 2, trail day 2. Scout Mountain, any place up there. There's a gate that you can ride around on a motorcycle. I recommend that you do it, and I encourage you to do it because it's a little bit of a hike up there if you don't do that. But you can ride up on top. There's an electronic sight, and any place up there works. Deep Creek Crest, the photograph on the page is right where you need to be, just to the right there. The Sublet Range Crest, there's a really nice little knob. You go right to the top of the knob, and it's right where the waypoint says it is. Lake Channel entrance is just the basalt chute going into Lake Channel. Gaston Beatty Well, way out in the middle of nowhere. And when you get out there, I'm pretty sure you're going to have the same thought I've always had, which is, why on earth did anybody ever think this was a good place to put in some infrastructure? Then finally, anywhere on top of Big Southern Butte. That's the last one. Day 3. Oh, by the way, day 1, there's a bonus section. There's not one on day 2. Day 1, there is a bonus section that's an alternative way to get to the top of Old Baldy, the first mountain. It's a rough way to do it. I mean, it's pretty doggone steep, so it's a hard way to get a bonus point. But these bonus sections that are in black on the map, that's an extra challenge point if you decide to do that. So if you want to bank away some spare challenge points, riding those black bonus sections is a way to do it. Now, there's not one on day 2, but there is one on day 1 early on. I think there's 2 on day 1. There's another one that not everybody can do, but there's another one down there around South Elkhorn Trail. On day 3, there's one, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So on day 3, Arco Pass, anywhere, just up there somewhere near, there's 2 waypoints indicated. Any place up there in the vicinity of those 2 waypoints, you can get a cool photo. Just take the photo. Wet Creek Basin, the same way. It says it's near 3D XYZ 26. Just any place in the vicinity of that waypoint, go ahead and take your photo. Stewart Canyon, Corral Creek Pass. It's obvious. When you get there, you're going to know what was going on. Wild Horse Lookout. There's a photograph there on the challenge point page that shows you where to go. Can't miss it. Burnt Aspen Cane Creek. Again, you can't miss it. There's a very spectacular place up there to take the photograph. Cliff View. That's west of Ketchum. It's above Warfield, Red Warrior, all that stuff. You're riding a nice trail. You're up high. You come around a corner, and all of a sudden there's a nice big sort of a reddish-brown cliff off to the north. You can't miss it. It's near waypoint 68 for day 3. And finally, Big Peak Creek. You're only going to see that if you're either doing the challenge section or you're on the 3-person variation. You'll know it when you see it. You ride down into the creek, and you ride through these big boulders, and you got to pop out the other side. You'll know it when you see it. Oh, and on day 3, there is a bonus section. The bonus section is back there in the beginning. It's up near Pass Creek. There's a bonus section on the map. That's one that is a little bit more of an undertaking to do. It's not one of the easier ways to pick up an easy point. Day 4, you're coming out of Smoky Bar Store. First one is Paradise Peak. Again, it's really obvious. It'll take you about an hour out of Kalen's store to get to it, just north of waypoint 6. The Salmon headquarters, as the crow flies, is probably about 10 miles away, and it's really close to waypoint 12. Again, it's obvious when you get there. You'll see a nice scenic view. Grand Prize Gulch, West Fork Pass. Again, it's just a scenic view right at a pass between 2 valleys. Castle Merriman is the iconic photo that almost everybody has a picture of in their Tour of Idaho adventure, and there's a photograph of it on the challenge point page that accompanies day 4. Little Boulder, Big Boulder Pass is about 5 trail miles north of that. It's the pass between Little Boulder and Big Boulder Creek. It's actually up pretty high, too. That's about a 9,200-foot pass up there. Railroad Ridge is the tour high point. It's 10,440 feet. There's a big plateau up there near waypoint 38. Any place on that plateau you want to get a good photograph, go ahead and do it. The next one is north of Sawmill Station after you're going to stop for lunch. It's the meadow right above Thompson Creek just before you T-bone the Cinnabar Trail. And again, you'll get up there and you'll see it. Anywhere in that meadow is fine. The photos that I took that are on the website were actually taken from Cinnabar Trail. The next one is a little bit farther north. It's 11-mile McKay Creek Divide. You're only going to see that if you're on a 3-person variation. Second Creek is another one that you're going to see. It's a divide. It's pretty scenic. You're only going to see that if you're on a 2 or 3-person variation. Finally, Ram's Horn. Everybody's going to see that. Really cool place up around 9,500 feet. And you get to see a considerable chunk. If you know what you're looking for, you can actually see about 3 or 4 days worth of the tour from that one spot. Oh, and on day 4, between right off the Custer Motorway, just beyond that 11-mile McKay Creek Divide Trail, there's a bonus section there that goes out to the wilderness area and back. That is the easiest way along the entire tour to pick up a challenge point if you need one. It's a bonus section. It'll probably take you less than 40 minutes to ride all the way out from the Custer Motorway and back. I don't care what variation of the route you're doing. If you want to pick up an easy point and you're running a little ahead of schedule that day or on schedule, that one's a good one to do because it's very easy. It's a simple trail. Take your kids on it, an XR 100 if you want to. It's fast, and nothing bad's probably going to happen to you out there. Day 5. Rolling out of Chalice on day 5. Twin Peaks is the first one, and you will be up there hopefully at or before the crack of dawn. The lookout may not be awake when you get up there, so you don't need to go beating on the door if you're up there super early in the morning. The next one is Eddy Basin View. It's near 5D XYZ 14. You'll know it when you see it. Furnace Creek View. The photograph on the challenge point page of my 300 is right where you need to take that photo. It's an obvious spot when you get there. Van Horn Peak. That's the place where I told you when I was describing day 5 that you might want to stop and look around because a lot of people have nearly ridden off the cliff there. You'll know it when you see it. It's a spectacular place, and there's a hard turn back off to the left, actually almost over the rider's left shoulder. Right there is where you want to take that photo. Alder Creek View is a spectacular boulder field. It's a few miles north of that. You're going north. You take a right and head down the Alder Creek Trail, and there's a boulder field. You go past the lake, and then you pop up over a little hill and start down through a boulder field. That's where you want to take the photo there. There are shots of all of these, by the way, somewhere on the Tour of Idaho pages. So you'll recognize them when you get there. Taylor Mountain Pass is north of Hat Creek Lakes. It's the divide between Hat Creek Lakes and Iron Lake, basically. And if you watch the Jimmy film, it's the place where I met him and I was chainsawing one day. And finally, the only one that doesn't really have a cool view is the 45th parallel, but it's of geographic interest to a lot of people, and it's a super easy one to pick up. So there you go. It's up near China Hat Spring, if I'm not mistaken. Day 6, coming out of Wallace. Even though we gave Soloist a shortcut, you're still going to ride part of the route that the 2- and 3-person teams ride. You're just going to ride it in the opposite direction. So the waypoint is 60 XYZ5. And again, when you get there, you're going to look down. There's a really cool view down into Wallace Lake. That's where it is. Ulysses Lookout, everybody goes there. Again, that lookout is not manned or hasn't been any time I've ever been up there. I've been up in the lookout before, but if you get there and the steps look a little rickety, you don't have to necessarily climb up that one. Indian Peak is about 10 miles, 6 to 10 miles north as the crow flies. You won't have any trouble finding that. Ridge View, there's a photograph of it there on the challenge point page. Granite Mountain is another lookout, so you can't get lost finding that one. Continental Divide Trail, it's very close to 60 XYZ 53. You'll know it when you see it. Lit Creek Sheep Creek Divide, that's a brand new one. Now that is a variation that only 2- and 3-person teams have to do. But if you're a soloist, you're not going to gain a point by doing this, but it's a cool trail. You might want to ride up there too. And there's a little out and back up near the top, and it's right at the top of that out and back, and there's a waypoint right where you need to be. The next one is the side hill, anywhere between waypoint 64 and 66, and you'll know it when you see it because there's an impressive drop off of your right handlebar. And finally, the Steen Mountain Lookout is the last one for that day. It's up near the top. The guy that's in that lookout the last 3 or 4 years is kind of a cranky rascal. He probably won't agree to take your picture, but if you can talk him into doing it, that's a good place for a nice group picture that somebody else besides you took. Day 7, Blue Nose Lookout, only if you're in a 2- and 3-person team. It's just an old lookout. Short road that goes up to it. Nez Perce Pass, big parking lot up there. There's an outhouse, really nice outhouse, in fact. It's basically where you wander back into Idaho from your short sojourn over into Montana. Salmon Mountain Lookout, that one's an interesting one. That's a bonus. It's not required. And it's another way to pick up a point if you need one. You have to walk out there, and it's going to take you about 20 minutes to walk out and back. So hopefully you brought something besides your motocross boots. I wouldn't walk out there in motocross boots. But if you want to pick up one not too hard and you're a little ahead schedule, that's an easy one to do. Burnt Knob Lookout, again, you can't get lost there. Red River View, you'll know it when you see it. It's right at XYZ 39. And finally, Anderson Butte, anywhere between 80 and 81. There's a kind of an obvious place there where you come up and there's a little clearing. But any place in that vicinity, you're going to be just fine. Day 8, Waldy Lookout. Now, you must climb to the lookout. If you get there super early in the morning, there might not be anybody there, and then I would excuse it. If there's nobody in the lookout, you don't need to go up there. But those people, kind of like the guy in Twin Peaks Lookout, they really look forward to talking to you. They know what's up. And so they'll chat you up. They'll take your picture, and it's a lot of fun. So if there's somebody up there and there's not a problem with you going up. If it's before daylight, though, I don't expect you to go up there, just if you're up there after daylight. Fish Butte, that's not the same as the Fish Butte Trail. There's an old electronic site up there, and there's a pad for it. There's no infrastructure left, but you'll know it when you see it. Fish Butte Trail, there's a photograph of where the challenge point is. It's in the challenge point page right next to day 8. Castle Creek is just another lookout that's off the Lolo motorway. And then finally, the Scurvy Lookout. Those of you who are soloist, if you elect to not do the final loop on day 8, you'll have to pick it up on day 9, which is allowed. Day 9, getting pretty close to the end. Lundi Ridge Switchback. Now, the Lundi Ridge Switchback, soloists can avoid doing that entire trail, but in order, everybody needs that challenge point near YZ1. So if you're a soloist, if you look on the map, you'll notice there's a green trail going out there. Soloists have to ride at least part of that if they want to pick that challenge point up. And the reason I did that is it's one of the coolest trails in the entire tour. It's dead simple. It's a 1 on a scale to 5. And it's beautiful. It's a really pleasant little trail that goes through the woods, and I don't want anybody to miss it. So soloists need to pick that up too. So if you're not going to ride the whole Lundi Ridge Rock Garden Trail, just ride out, poach that waypoint, ride back, get on the Toboggan Ridge Road, and keep going. Quartz Creek is up near Fly Hill. It's obvious. You'll see it. Heller Divide, same way. You'll see it. That's way up in the St. Joe. Heart Lake View is what you're going to see right after you pop up on the State Line Trail coming up out of the Heller Divide. Cliff Lake View is similar to that. It's a wonderful view down off to the rider's right into Montana. Stevens Peak is a lot farther north and west. You're getting pretty close to the end of the day, and there's a bunch of side hill up there near Stevens Peak, and any place up there in the vicinity of that waypoint where you can get the photo is fine. Finally, the Ryan Hotel with Donna, we hold her in high enough regard that we actually made her a waypoint. Now, let's say you couldn't get a booking at the Ryan, which happens occasionally. I'll work something out about that waypoint. Don't go bothering her if you weren't staying there. I'll figure out a way for you to make that up. It would be nice to know about that in advance, by the way. But we'll work something out. I don't want you to feel like you have to go down and bother her if you're not staying there just to get that challenge point. We'll come up with something else. Finally, last day, as I told you last week, last day I want you to just get to the end of the trail. So not only are there not a lot of difficult trails, but there's not a ton of challenge points that you have to pick up. Looks like 5. Moon Saddle, it's obvious. Spyglass Peak, it's obvious. Jackknife Peak, it's obvious. You'll get there, you won't have any trouble finding these places. Hoodoo Mountain, again, it's obvious. There's a big electronic site up there. Just don't loiter too long. Finally, Sundance Mountain, and you're at the end. You'll be getting there in the middle of the day. The guy will chat you up. Every person I've met working there is just nice as heck. Unless you're the first person out, they're going to know what you're up to, and they're usually glad to take your picture and have you sign their register, and it's all good. So now, let's take just a few minutes to talk about a few of the rules this year. The things that you should have already done, everybody should be a member of the Facebook page by now. Everybody should be a member of the forum. You should have all declared your team, and we should have your PLB links, although some of them might not work yet. Everybody's probably already done that. The other thing that everybody has to do is within 72 hours of the end of the tour, you have to send me your tracks. Tracks are not the same as your PLB track log. Those are at 10 to 20 minute resolution. That's no bueno. If you don't know what the difference between a track point and a waypoint and a route point is, you need to figure that stuff out pretty quick. There's information about that on the forum. You can read all about it. But basically, a track point is what a GPS unit produces when you have it set to track mode. And typically the resolution is somewhere between 1 and 2, maybe 5 or 10 seconds, but they're really close together. They don't have as much information appended to them as a waypoint does. For one thing, they don't have a unique name, so you can store a lot more of them. Now, when you are out there during the day, what you want to make sure you do at the end of every day is save your tracks for that day. Take some spare SD cards and save several copies of them so you don't lose anything. One of the most common things that happens to people is they forget to save their tracks at the end of the day. They ride the next day, and if you don't have a lot of internal memory or a big SD card, or you don't have your GPS unit configured to write to your SD card in an overflow condition, what'll happen is when it runs out of internal memory or it runs out of space on a smaller card, it just starts overwriting the data that's already in there. So I've had teams that were unaware of that again, didn't practice with the stuff before they left. And they get to day 8 and, they have a little bit of time. They start looking around. They find out that all of their first 4 days have been overwritten. They don't have any of that data anymore. Don't be those people this year. Save your tracks every day. SD cards are small and easy to store. Bring several of them and make sure you have some redundancy. You back all that stuff up. I need those in 72 hours after you're done. It's easier for me if you put them all together in one file. But if you want to send me your individual days, I'll stitch them together myself. That's just fine. It takes me, an additional half an hour's worth of work probably to do that. But I'll do it for you if that's what it takes to get it done within 72 hours. Now, let's talk about teams and what a team means. That changes a little bit every year too. We've always allowed a maximum of 3 people on a team. So you can be a soloist, a member of a 2-person team, a member of a 3-person team. Anything other than that, you're doing a T2 or a T3, something like that. What has changed a little bit are what we require, how many challenge points we require 1, 2, and 3-person teams to accumulate, to count for a tour of Idaho, and kind of what happens if someone drops off of your team. So here's something for you to be aware of. It is okay for you to lose a team member. What is not okay is for you to gain a team member. That can't happen, and you also can't change the composition of your team along the way. So there are a ton of perfectly legitimate reasons for losing a team member. You have a mechanical person just says, this isn't for me. There's an injury. You can lose team members for all kinds of reasons. The way the rules are this year, if you get to Pocatello and somebody drops out, let's say you're a member of a 2-person team. You have someone drops out at the end of day 1. When you start on trail day 2, you're now a soloist. It used to be last year, it was 2 trail days later. So it would have been day 3, you would have been soloist. This year, we backed that up a little bit. Next year, I think we're probably going to go back to the way it used to be. But for this year, the very next day, you're considered a soloist or a member of a 2-person team, whatever the case may be. So it's the next day, not the same day. If a person drops out in the middle of the day, you still got to ride all the stuff that you were supposed to ride. But if the next day, you can go down a level, whatever it takes. Now, let's say that you're sitting around in Chalice one night. There's other teams there. You run into them. They're losing people. You look at each other and go, well, why don't we team up and ride the rest of it? That's no good either. You cannot reconfigure your team. You can lose team members, but you cannot gain, nor can you reconfigure your teams in any way. If you lose team members, you go on without them, and that's that. If you feel you need to retire, you're going to have to retire. But we've had some issues in the past where there were some people using that as a cover to do some things that basically bent the rules pretty far. So you can't do that. So that's what constitutes a team. Those are the rules for the teams. The reason why there are 1, 2, and 3 team variations is, I've said many times before, solo's really tough, so we give you a slightly easier route. If you're a member of a 3-person team, you don't have to carry as much of equipment. On a 3-person team, if you get hurt, someone can stay with you while somebody else goes for help. Everything is easier the more people you have. So that's why we changed the route a little bit, to sort of make it just as hard for a soloist as it is for a person that's a member of a 2 or 3-person team. So there are up to 70 challenge points available in the 10 days of the tour, depending upon the size of the team that you're on. Here's how you can augment or get dinged a little bit on that. Anytime you deviate from the tour route significantly, we have the option of dinging you a challenge point. Now, for the most part, we probably won't do that. You get lost and you find your way back, as long as you didn't find the trail later and use that to gain an advantage, you're probably not going to lose that point. There were some sections that we kind of considered navigation test sections. And the reason we have that rule in there is if you got very far off the route in those, it was going to cost you a point. It was encourage you to learn your navigation early. But this year, there's really not any of that left. So if you get lost, as long as you find your way back to the point where you got lost that was on the route and continue from there, you're probably okay. I told people last week that, there's a couple of places where, if you're running short on gas, there's ways to ride off the trail into town. As long as you ride back up and get on the trail in that spot, it'd be nice if I knew about that. I'd like to know what your thinking is and what you're doing. Make sure you don't have anybody down there waiting for you to give you any help or anything like that. But there's some things like that we can work with you on. So probably you're not going to lose that point. It'd have to be something mighty bad. And it'd have to be something that gave you an advantage over other teams. Now, here's one that comes up a lot. Using any electronic device to ask for assistance in navigation. I want to ding you a point every time I find out it happened. That is absolutely no bueno. Finding your way is an important part of this. Now, the one person you can ask is me. Generally, I will try to at least give you a hint. Sometimes I may tell you, I can't help you there. That's something that you need to figure out. But you're always welcome to ask. But if you ask anybody other than me, that is a violation of challenge point rules. Now, I may not find out about it, but you broke the rules if you did that. And I don't want you to do that. Finding your way is important. The reason that I insisted on this is in the past, and the reason that I'm the only person you can ask is in the past, there have been teams that had friends that had either done the route before or were familiar enough with the route that it was basically like having somebody in your ear the whole way. Yeah, when you get to this point, turn left, turn right. I want you to figure that stuff out. Part of this whole thing is the time that you spent on map study, learning the route, your cleverness and being able to get there on the ground and see this isn't exactly what I thought. What do I do here? If someone is telling you what to do at every point, that clearly gives you an advantage over teams that are sitting there taking the time to try to figure it out. That takes time and it takes energy. It's also stressful sometimes. You don't know if you're doing the right thing. If somebody's in your ear at every point saying, oh, yeah, you're fine, just go down this trail, that helps you out. We want to level that out. So if it's just me doing the answering, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I've told everybody else, or I'm not going to tell you the same thing that I didn't tell everybody else. So you're welcome to ask. You may get an answer. You may not. But within reason, there was a team a couple years ago that PM'd to me probably 6 times a day for the whole 10 days they were out there. And it got to be too much. After a while, I said, I'm not answering any more questions. You guys have worn out the privilege. So you can ask. You might not get an answer, but the best thing is to figure it out on your own. But if you ask anybody other than me, that's an infraction. Now, writing an extra non-required challenge section, you can get an extra point for that. So if you're a soloist, you're not required to ride any. Ride one, you get an extra point. If you're a member of a 2-person team and you ride 3, you'll both get an extra point. So riding an extra challenge section is worth a point. Those bonus sections are all worth a point. And some of those are pretty easy points. The one on day 3, for instance, is pretty choice. I'd poach that one if I were you. Riding team variants for a larger team for a full day. It's got to be for a full day. You can't just ride one of an up 1-person team variant and poach a point. And the reason for that is sometimes the up team variants are easier than the down team variants. Sometimes these 3-person routes are so long that towards the end of the day, we give them a little shortcut just to make their life a little easier. Well, if you're a soloist and you come along, you're already on the easier route, and then you take an even easier trail, that should not count an extra point. It won't. So you've got to ride up for a full day if you want to claim that point. And then the auxiliary routes, we've already talked about those. They're indicated in black on the maps. Now, there are some things that can get you in hot water pretty quick that may result in a DNF. Prearranged support or support from an entire retired rider. Completely no bueno. Violates one of the most basic tenets of the tour, which is that this is like a climbing route in which you carry all your own stuff all the way to the top of the mountain. There's no help along the way. There's only been one violation of that rule, and I explained that in a previous video. There's a guy that did so much work despite having a little bit of help that we couldn't possibly, in my view, with a clear conscience, say your effort didn't count. But that's been one exception in 15 years, and there's not likely to be another, because now we're making it abundantly clear that we frown upon that a lot. So if you have anything like you sent some gear someplace, you cache some supplies along the way, you've got a shuttle rider we don't know about, and we find out about that, it's just DNF. You're done. You can't have help. I've had teams call me and say, well, I have a flat tire. What do I do? And I go, well, ride to some place where you can get a new one. And, again, that's why we recommend the tires that we do. You use those desert racing tires, ultra heavy duty tubes, couple bead locks. You can ride those things flat. It won't handle very well, but you can ride them for a long way. The rest of that stuff, you might be in some trouble if you have a problem, and you're going to be. Motorcycles make really poor wheelbarrows on a lot of single track trails, so you're on your own. That's the reason why we suggest some of the things that we do. Misrepresenting your effort. We could probably work anything out. While you're still out on the trail, there's probably nothing you can do that I can't figure out a way to help you out, except maybe the no support thing. That one is probably tough. After it's done, if you don't have tracks, things like that, that's going to be a little bit tough too. But while you're out on the trail, if you miss a trail, you make a navigation error, just talk to me about it. People make navigation errors, and they say, well, what do I do? And I say, well, just ride an extra challenge section, and it'll be fine. Now, some people say, well, I don't want to do that. Nothing I can do again about that. But there's always a way, if you talk to me, that we can work that stuff out. So don't get too bent out of shape. Don't worry that a single mistake is going to hose you unless it is having somebody help you out. We had a team a couple years ago that, to great fanfare, spent months telling me how much they admired this great adventure and how awesome it was that, we had standards in a world that doesn't have any standards. And I wasn't able to meet them at the flagpole, but again, there's a security camera on the flagpole, so I can see everybody that goes by. And I got home a little bit after they had come through, saw that they'd been here, they'd signed the register and everything, and looked on the footage and said, yep, they were here all right. So I had to go into town. There's a convenience store not too far from my house, and I go down to this convenience store and I see a pickup truck with a trailer attached, a toy hauler trailer in the back. And I see two bikes sitting in the back of that trailer that look a whole lot like those two bikes that I just saw in my security camera footage. They got giant loot bags on them, and they've got, the Ram mounts, and they've got Trail Tech Voyager Pros, and man, they sure look like Tour of Idaho bikes. And then I walk around, and I noticed that the license plate was an out-of-state plate from a county that just miraculously happened to be the same state and county that this team was from. And I just snapped a photo of it and sent it to him via PM and said, is this you guys? And I never heard from him again. So that comes up more often than you would think, and that's why every once in a while we're a little suspicious of people, because it's not like someone's never tried to work us before. Rest day other than Pocatello, no bueno. You rest in Pocatello, and that's that. Now, there's an exception to that, a little bit of an exception, in that if you fail to make your goal for a day, let's say you're trying to get to Chalice and something happens and you're forced to spend the night up there in Ramshorn Peak somewhere. That's okay. Just get up the next morning and keep on going. You'll have to make up that time the next day, but that happens all the time. It tends to happen further north. Like a lot of people don't make it to Laksha Lodge. They end up sleeping out in the trails somewhere, and there's all kinds of reasons why something like that may happen. That's fine. You're not going to be DQ'd. Just get a few hours of sleep, get up on the bike as quickly as you can, and you'll have to make up the time the next day. So you'll have to ride all the way down to Laksha. You have to stay on the route. You don't get to shortcut it. but they just keep on going. I've personally had that happen on about half of my tours. For one reason or the other, I haven't been able to get to where I needed to be that night. I just slept underneath the bike, got up super early the next morning, got up at 3 instead of 4 or 5 to try to make up that hour, and knew I was going to get in a little bit later that night. That happens a lot to teams early in the year when things aren't sawed and you have to do a lot of sawing. But later in the year, it probably won't be as much of an issue unless you have a mechanical or you loop your bike off a side hill somewhere. Riding a marked closed trail. If there's any ambiguity about it, I'm not going to ding you. If there's a reasonable reason to be confused, that's okay. What I'm talking about here is when I know that trail was closed. There's a fire or something closed the trail and you decided to ignore everything and ride it anyway. That's when you're going to get dinged. We had a guy that did that once. Decided that he thought it was cool to figure out a way to elude the law enforcement people that were keeping people from riding down this trail, rode around them, and then got on the internet and started talking about it. Oh, look at this clever thing I did. That really pisses the authorities off. I hear about that. I hear about that every year. Every time there's a fire, I get phone calls from some fire management chief back east somewhere, chewing on my ear about Tour of Idaho guys riding around fires. It's almost never true, but it is sometimes true. And to the degree that you're the reason I get one of those phone calls this year, there might be some trouble. If there's a fire, we will get you around it. But please don't ride through trails that are deliberately closed. What happens more often than not is people get confused by the trail signs, which even I get confused by. They're weird sometimes. But if I say the trail is open in the route description and the MVUM map differs or the trail sign's confusing in terms of the dates or something, I'm probably right. If I'm not and you wrote it thinking that I was right and you were right, that's not going to be a DQ or a DNF. So it's got to be you knew what you were doing, you knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway. That's the time that you get dinged for that. Failure to submit a reasonably complete track file within 72 hours of finishing. Again, I need that pretty quick. There can be gaps in it. That happens every once in a while. But like if everybody on your team has the same gap, I may have some questions about that. But, to err is human, and I get the fact that under stress you might forget to save part of a day, and that happens almost every year. We've got your PLB stuff. If there's no other reason to be suspicious, we can probably work around that. Now, day one's a little special. Day one's the day we have a time limit, so you've got to be to the flagpole by midnight on day one. That's hard and fast rule, no exceptions. And you need to stay pretty close to the route on day one. We can ding you for navigation errors on day one. You ride a wrong trail on day one, I'm going to look at that way different than I am on day 8 or day 9. The reason is, day one is the test day. It is designed to tell you whether or not this adventure is for you. So if you make errors on day one, there's a lesson maybe in that, and you should probably be listening to that lesson. I've had teams that started out at 3 in the morning and got to the flagpole at 5 minutes until midnight. Technically, you made it under the wire, but really, there's no rain, no reason for you to have taken that long other than it took you that long. There's a lesson in that, and you need to listen to what that lesson is. So you add these things up. You need, there's about 70 available there's 70 available altogether. Soloist, I think, needs 62, and you can read all that for yourself. There's some ancillary points that you get by just meeting people along the way. By the way, you have to meet them along the way. So you cannot show up at the Red Wing shoe store and get the point that you get for talking to Jason Smoot before or after the tour. You get it in your off day in Pocatello, or you don't get it at all. Same with Kaylin. You get that point when you are there at Smoky Bar's store. If she's not there, Jenny or somebody else will work. But those are points that you accumulate along the tour. You can't get them before the tour. You can't get them after the tour. You get them during the tour. That's the whole idea. Well, that's about it. A few minutes about the challenge sections themselves. About 5 or 6 years ago, we divorced challenge sections from challenge points and just made the challenge sections harder variations of the tour. The reason we did that was because we had a lot of people coming through. Mostly they were people that didn't finish the tour. Something happened, but their parting shot was, "Oh yeah, and all those trails were beginner trails anyway." It's not true, but we put these challenge sections in basically as a, well, okay, smart guy, ride this. But they're not all the same. Some are harder than others, and I will tell you right now that the ones that are pretty simple are day 2 is pretty simple. Just add some length to not advance you more than 100 yards down the route either. I mean, it comes back out. It's a big loop that basically comes out about where you started. So the day 2 one is pretty easy. Day 5 is easy. It's just long. And day 10 is easy. I don't like it very much, but it's easy. So if I were looking for the 3 easiest, those would be the ones I would recommend. Now, the rest of them, there's something to them all. That day 1 is Charles Rose told everybody the other day, it's for real. And it doesn't matter whether it's wet or whether it's dry, because on day 1, when it's not raining, it's hot. And there have been some strong riders have showed up in Pocatello and needed to go to the emergency room for an IV after riding that day 1 challenge section. You hit that in a hot day and it will wear you out. Day 3 is Big Peak Creek. Now, if you're on a 3-person team, that might be a good one to do because you're going to ride the hard part of it anyway. So I would consider just doing that challenge section if I were on a team of 3. Day 4 is Custer Lookout. It's a little technical and it's way airy. I mean, it's up in the air. So if you don't like heights, that might be a good one to avoid. And you got to go all the way to Lookout, by the way, to consider it good. Day 6 is Ditch Creek, and you're going the right direction. You're going downhill, but it's got some gnarl to it. It'll give you all you want. Day 7, all I ever tell everybody is don't do it. And that makes some people say, well, of course I'm going to do it. Since that guy said not to, well, knock yourself out. That's all I'll say. It's Marlin Springs. And the iconic photo that appears all over the website and on the Facebook page of my bike and a motorcycle helmet sitting on top of a cross, that was taken at Marlin Springs, right where things are starting to get real interesting. The next one, the day 8 is Sherman Creek, and Sherman Creek's a good one to do if you're a strong rider. It's got some genuine gnarl to it, and it's also got some exposure, and it combines both those things. But it also shaves about 40 miles off, shaves a lot of time if you have the ability to ride it. So that's another one I'd think about, especially if you're on a 3-person team. If you're a soloist and you're a little unsure of your ability, I might not do it, but strong 2 and most 3-person teams can probably handle that. After that, it is the next one, the day 9, is a pretty ballsy one. That one, I've ridden parts of it several times, but I've only ridden the whole thing once, and it was one of those places where it occurred to me you should not fall off your motorcycle in a bunch of this. It's long, it's difficult. It might be the hardest one, and you're tired too when you get up there. So if you do that one, just be prepared. You got your work cut out for you, and you're riding up some mighty steep stuff on that too. And then finally, there's the day 10 one, Independence Creek, which again I said it's not very difficult. It's right at the end if you need one. So that's it for the challenge sections. That's the way I see them anyway, and I think most people generally agree with me on that ranking. So that's about it. I'm running up against time here. I don't want to make this go on too long. Hopefully that gives you a feel for how this whole challenge point system evolved, why we do it, what the challenge sections are all about. It's all, again, just a way to put this thing together in a way that makes it really adventurous. All right, well, that's it. PBR Monday again. Next Monday night, it'll be, unless I work out my internet issues once again, it'll be recorded. So see you then. Ciao.